You are seeing a portion of a street, and I have a few photographs of it to show you while I say that, in essence, the big push to remove lead pipe used to supply fresh water to houses of residential areas of the United States of America was underway in earnest in 2023, though a push to remove had been going on for some years. For example, in 2023, the Biden-Harris administration pushed out rules to remove lead service lines from all over the country within 10 years, and it was designed to be action to protect communities from lead exposure. By the way, in late 2023, some cities were already working to remove lead supply lines. In addition, the federal government, under the Biden-Harris administration, pushed out the idea that the lead pipe was more likely to be affecting low-income and communities of color, which was a racist-type thing related to other words used, which included inequitable infrastructure and underdevelopment in such communities. Incidentally, the head of the EPA Office of Water, a Miss Fox, said such things in November 2023 as, "We're bending the arc towards equity and justice on this legacy issue." And that idea had links to the then head of the U.S. Department of Transportation, who was saying that some roads in the country were racist-based and had to be removed or replaced. It was and is nonsense. Here is the third photograph of the street, and while I show you photographs of the street, I present some background information. In the very early 1950s, my father was involved with surveying for the Wisconsin-Michigan Pipeline Company, which would be involved in helping to get, for example, natural gas to the western side of Michigan. Later, my father worked as a draftsman for a company called Giffords and Rossetti, an architectural company of the Detroit area. From the 1960s to the 1980s, my father was a draftsman for General Motors Corporation and in the department first known to him as Argonaut, which was housed in the Argonaut building in Detroit, and later known as plant engineering. Basically, much of my father's work time was related to drawing up pipe, such as supply pipe for gas and supply pipe for fresh water. For example, he did work that helped make factories for General Motors Corporation. One important job that he had was to draw up piping, though maybe not all, for the main building of the Allen Park Water Treatment Plant of Allen Park, Michigan, and that job was done in the early 1960s. On April 17, 2024, I was able to observe a construction team while it replaced lead water pipe for several houses in Ferndale, Michigan. And I begin this video in earnest with a photograph of one particular house that had a lead supply line on that day. In this house, the lead pipe came out of the floor in the basement, and it met a water meter, and the house water line was attached to the other side of the meter. I state that my father told me years ago, you do not have to worry about lead service lines, since lead does not really leach out of cold water pipes or service pipes that are underground at temperatures that are often in the 40s and lower. And he added, lead can leach out of hot water pipes. The first job in replacing the lead supply line, as shown in this video, was to mark off and cut open with a concrete saw a location for an access hole in the street, and the hole was designed to be about 6 feet by 4 feet. The hole would be used to reach the city main that was under the street. The main was down about 5 feet. In essence, in relation to this street where the work was being done on several houses, the city supply line ran down the middle of the street. A feed line to a house existed in two parts. One part went from a tap-off spot at the city main to what was called the greenbelt area of the property, which was a grassy area between the street and the sidewalk, and that was where the shutoff valve for the house was set up. The second part went from the valve in the greenbelt area to the basement of the house. Next, a machine that could be called, for example, a concrete hammer or a hydraulic hammer, which had a hydraulic breaker tool installed, the chisel-like thing, was used to break out the concrete or blacktop of the street. A backhoe with a bucket attachment was used to remove scrap blacktop and concrete from the forthcoming hole in the street and to place the material in a dump truck. Before digging could take place, the members of the construction crew had to be well aware of where existing water lines and gas lines and such existed in the ground. This photograph shows a signal generator. By the way, some short time before digging would start, staffers of the gas company put down rough markings about where gas line ran. This time, to find the old lead line in the ground, the signal generator was attached to a point on the line and to some grounding point. A construction member then used a detector to trace the signal, and the detector gave an idea, a pretty good idea, about the location of the line and the depth of the line. Slowly, the crew worked to dig out the hole in the street, and the two-part goal was to find where the old water line met the city main and to find a spot along the city main where a new tap-off spot could be made. They carefully went deeper and deeper, and the digging work involved a backhoe and shovels. And here is a third look at the hole, and the guys were nearly down to the main. Once the location for the existing tap-off spot was found, which had a valve, the valve could be shut off, and the old line could be cut away. To make a tap-off spot on the main, a two-part tool was used, and it was a drilling tapping tool, and it is most often called a tapping machine. You are seeing some equipment and stuff. The black-like circular thing is a rubber seal. The red unit is a generator, and it was not part of the two-part tool proper. Here, one of the members of the team was getting a part of the two-part tool ready to be used. This construction man had to chip away at encrusted material on the main with a cement hammer to create a bare area on the main. You can see the seal in the man's hand at this point. Here, the seal is in place, roughly, on the city main. Next, the construction man worked to set the first main part of the tapping tool in place on the seal and, in essence, around the city main. In this photograph, the first part of the two-part tool, now set tight with a chain system, was in place. Here, the second part of the tool, which had a drilling tapping bit, was in place, and the drilling tapping bit would create a hole with threads in the city main. With the drilling tapping tool completely assembled, another tool was used to drive the turning of the shaft or boring bar with the drilling tapping bit, and the drive tool was motorized and operated with power from the generator. The boring bar could have been turned by using a socket wrench and socket. The entire process took place while the city main was not turned off. The two-part tool was designed to keep water from escaping from the main while the work was done, and that involved valves built into the machine, such as one that might informally be called a swing valve. Here you can see some of the tool was removed, yet no water from the main was flowing out. Next, the valve unit was made ready, and the valve unit could be called, for instance, a corporation stop. And the valve unit was then set in position on the drive tool or shaft. The drive tool got pushed back into the first part of the tool, and the valve unit was cranked or threaded into the city main. Once the entire tool was removed, the valve unit, now installed, can be seen, and that completed the most important part of the water line replacement sequence, I say. And I show this photograph, and it shows the original tap-off spot on the city main, and the valve was closed, and the 102-year-old lead pipe was detached. Next, the second hole could be dug, and it would be about 5 feet deep. To dig, the guys had to watch out for gas line, particularly that which had been installed a few years previously, and that meant they regularly used the signal tracing tool, the two-part tool, really. Here's a close-up view of the signal sending unit. Finally, a good amount of the shaft or tube used with the shutoff valve for turning on or turning off water to the house was exposed. For this video, the hole is now identified as the second hole, and the hole in the middle of the street is the first hole. What now had to be done was new copper pipe had to be set in place between the two holes, and of course, one end of the pipe would be connected to the tap-off spot on the city main, which was in the first hole. Hold it! I have to make an aside here. Really, it is copper tubing and not copper pipe that was being used to replace the lead service line. And actually, I can say that the lead line was really lead tubing, since the old lead line was easily bendable. This photograph shows some of the old lead tubing, but I will call it lead pipe since everybody does. To pull out the old lead pipe and to pull new copper line from the second hole to the first hole, a steel cable-based tool was used. On one end of the cable was a Chinese handcuff-like thing that could grasp one end of the copper tubing. A backhoe was used to pull out the old lead line and pull through the new copper line. Here you can see the copper line was following the lead line. The copper line existed as new in a coil, and this line was 1-inch copper line. You can see that a construction worker was working to get the end of the copper tubing to meet the valve unit or corporation stop at the city main. At this point, the work in the first hole was done, since the copper line was connected to the valve unit. I did not show how a pressure nut had been put over the end of the copper tubing that was made to meet the city main. Here I show a valve and a tool. The tool is referred to as a rounder. It is used to make sure the end of a piece of copper tubing is round. When an end is round, it will slide into a fitting properly, or a fitting or nut will slide over it properly. Next to the rounder is the valve that will be used to turn off and turn on water to the residence, and such a valve might be called a curb stop valve. Here, the rounder was being used to round the end of the copper tubing that was in the second hole. Once the end of the tubing was ready, the valve unit could be attached to the tubing. This photograph shows the old valve shutoff system, and the long pole part is nothing more than a piece of pipe, down which a rod-like tool can be sent down from ground level to shut off water or turn on water, or turn on or turn off the valve. The tool, a thing mostly made up of a long rod, that is used to operate such a valve is often called a curb key. And this photograph shows the new access shaft for the new shutoff valve unit. Now I come to what happened with the piping system between the second hole and the basement of the residence. This image shows a machine that is generally known as a directional drilling machine, or a horizontal directional drill. It would be used to send a rod of sorts from the second hole to a target area, a precise location right near the current water meter in the house. Actually, the target area would be right near the water meter, which was in the basement, but the target area would be underneath the concrete floor of the basement near the meter. Here's another view of what might be considered the boring machine. What happens with such a machine is, as the machine runs, additional pieces of pipe are added every so often to extend the length of the boring rod or tool. The work that gets done is sort of like that of drilling a freshwater well or an oil well, during which sections of pipe are added to the main shaft so that a drilling bit can be sent farther and farther down into the ground, or farther and farther out from the drilling machine that is being used. To complete this boring job, one man operated the directional drill, and another operated a signal receiver, and the operator of the signal receiver reported what the drill operator had to do with the drilling machine to reach the target area. Here is a look at what type of reading could show up on a receiver. Using a jackhammer, a construction worker broke out a hole near the water meter. As had happened with the installation of the first piece of copper tubing, construction workers used the pulling cable to set new copper line in place. And you can see new copper line was being drawn down into the small hole in the cement floor and out of the house. It did not take long to get one end of the copper tubing to the second hole, which was at the greenbelt area, and begin the work to attach the line to the shutoff valve unit. The yellow pipe that you see is fairly new gas line, and the gas is natural gas. A few hours after the job for the day had begun, the work was nearly complete in the second hole. And finally, a construction worker could thread on the access pipe for the valve, down which a curb key could travel in the future. At this point, with everything connected, water could travel from the city main through the water meter to the fixtures in the house. I can say that about 60 feet of copper tubing was installed on this day, and I have no complaints with the work. But I do have complaints. I gathered up a few pieces of old lead pipe. The pieces came from two of the houses that were worked on the day, one piece of which is now the main subject of this video, and it is the short piece shown in this photograph. You can see that I have dated both pieces of lead. The two pieces of pipe were used for about 100 years. These pieces have crushed-in ends because the ends were cut with a lopper, which can be used to cut tree limbs. The lead is rather soft, which allows it to be cut with a lopper. Using a bandsaw, I cut off one end of each piece of lead pipe so that I could see clean and round ends. Here is a look at the newly cut end of the short piece of pipe. You can see it is round. You can see the inside of the pipe, and it looks rather clean or smooth. There is not a lot of scale in it, as might be found in a piece of used galvanized pipe of a water system of a house. This view is another view of the end. You can see brownish material on the inside wall. To me, that material looks like iron residue. Remember, to get to the house for 100 years or so, fresh water traveled in mostly iron pipe for miles and miles and miles. Only about 60 feet of the journey was in lead service line. I do not see evidence that a bunch of lead leached out of the pipe in 100 years, and in fact the pipe looks almost new. In addition, I bet the mineral deposits or iron residue on the inside wall of the pipe help block lead from leaching out of the pipe. Look at the measurement of the inside of the pipe. Keep in mind that you can stop the video at any time and get a really good look at all the measurements that will be shown in this video. Take a look at the inside dimension of the pipe, and I use a somewhat long shot to prove that I am not using a stand-in piece of pipe or a stunt double. Here is a close-up view, and you can easily see the reading, and the inside dimension is about 3/4 of an inch. Look at the reading that you can get with a micrometer. And for the record, I show the outside dimension of the pipe. And once more, I show the inside of the pipe. Notice the brown scale that seems to be protecting the lead surface, such as from wear from water. I see no evidence of leaching. The inside of the pipe is not deformed or pitted oddly. The thickness of the wall runs from about 0.210 inches to 0.215 inches, and that is a little less than 1/4 inch. I know not what the true original dimension was. It seems to me that nothing has really changed with the thickness in over the 102 years of use. So here is the former hole in the street, which was filled in with sand and gravel and cold patch, while the second hole was filled in with sand and dirt and topsoil and was topped off with grass seed and hay. A machine with a hydraulic vibrating plate compactor was used in the process to fill in all the holes in the ground. And I think I have smashed the idea that lead service pipes are so dangerous that they must be replaced quickly, such as within 10 years, and at a cost of billions and billions of dollars more expense for the citizens of the country. A person has to keep in mind how the life expectancy rates in the country have gone up over the last 100 years, even though millions of houses have had lead service pipe and still have lead service pipe. And now millions of streets and lawns and flower areas and tree roots are going to get screwed up for no real gain. And it is rotten, which involves defective racist themes. Oh, when the construction guys were not paying attention, some friends of mine took it upon themselves to have some fun and pretend they were squishing down a bunch of rocks and sand and dirt. It was one really good moment for Bob the Builder, Big Boy, and Charlie Brown.